Jack, fantastic to see you again. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. And I can't help but mention that we're taking our time away from the Masters, but good to go.
Away from the Masters, and to make matters even more interesting, I'm still coming to terms with the difference in public holidays between the UK and the US. Now that I'm US based, I did not realize that Easter Friday is not a holiday in the US. So my whole UK team are on holiday today and Monday, and here I am talking to you. But you know what? I think I got the better end of the deal.
Cool. Let's do a meaty meeting here today.
I
Right?
love it. Well, you and I spoke just before we came on, and I'd like to mix things up a little bit. So over the last few months, what we've done habitually is introduce a topic, kind of a hot topic, whether it had to do with playbooks or recruitment, how to build sales culture. We talked about, mindset around the recession and inflation and all that kind of stuff. But actually, you know that like you, I'm on the road quite a bit and I speak to audiences of CEOs. So what I thought we could do on this occasion is I've selected about half a dozen or so questions from CEOs of groups that I'm going to be speaking to in the next 2 weeks. And I think if you and I can maybe have a bit of an impassioned debate about how we would tackle these particular challenges, then much more than just these 6 CEOs are going to get value out of that. Are you up for it?
Love it. Love it. Love it. Let's go.
Fantastic. Well, the first question comes from Mike. I'll not name last names. Let's just say Mike. Mike is based in St. Louis. And Mike says, for someone like me who has an owner-led sales function in a service business without a sales team, what suggestions do you have of where to start building a sales team? Should I start with an outside salesperson, an inside salesperson, or something else? What are your thoughts, Jack?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say this for this question, but it applies for probably all of them. And that is a good doctor won't necessarily tell you, here, drink this, without asking a lot more questions.
For sure.
So this particular one is really a hot issue in terms of I need to know a whole heck of a lot more from Mike about what his organization is and where it's going and all that type of thing. So let me just take a crack at this, recognizing with that proviso. It depends big time on Mike's vision. What is it that he's trying to build? If let's just say, I'm going to pull numbers out of the air. Let's just say he's a $5 million annual sales driven company, but his aspirations are to be 20 to 30 million, and he'd like to do that over the next 5 years. Well, then I would tell you, get yourself a sales manager on board straight away to build the team. Most of the time, Morné, as you know, you hire a good sales manager, and that sales manager builds their team. In less than a year, that sales manager should pay for themselves with the increased business that's driven in the house. An awful lot of entrepreneurs and business owners do a slow creep. One ad at a time, a half of a person, a full-time, an inside or an outside. And that's a long, hard slog. If you're fully committed to your vision, and the vision is to really pop, then go for it. I mean, if you're not going for it, then I question whether you really buy into the vision yourself. Now, it could be, if I put that aside, it could be an inside salesperson if all you're looking for is somebody to set appointments for you, the owner-led sales guy who's booking the deals. If we're looking for appointment setter, that's an inside sales type of person. How about somebody that's going to go get their own leads and drive their own business? For me, in most businesses, that's an outside salesperson. And then I just wrap it all together and say, pay attention to how you compensate whatever those roles are that you're thinking about. And my bias, as you know, is always the closer I get to commission only, the better I find I sleep at night, in spite of the resistance that I hear in countries and in businesses about, well, in our business or our country, we can't get that done. Well, that's an attitude issue. That was covered on mindset in the session that we did. Yep. If you think you can't, then you'll be right. If you think you can, you'll be right.
Fantastic.
So I'll pass it back to you. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, actually, a follow-up question that I wanted to ask you, because I get this a lot with the similar kind of question that comes up. And I'll say to business owners, we'll talk about the 3 sins of sales management, which you, of course, made famous over the last 20 years. And one of those sins, as we know, is to take your best salesperson and promote them to a sales manager. And what companies will often tell me is, well, I can't afford a sales manager. And I certainly can't afford one who doesn't sell. I'm a small company. I'm still in the startup, scaling up phase. I'm not yet at the critical mass revenue where I can afford to have a sales manager who does not themselves carry a bag, to use a master's reference. Yeah. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so, an awful lot comes back to compensation. Look, if you give me the role of a sales manager and tell me that your vision is you really want to pop this company, and I'm going to need to go hire, let's say, 8 to 10 salespeople straight away. And you tell me that you'd like 2/3 to 3/4 of my income to be riding on the backs of the team I build. And I'm at risk with that team, but that at risk gives me all this upside if they were to just knock the ball out of the park. I want that deal all day long. And in fact, I might negotiate for even less space for more upside because I've got so much confidence. Look, I've built fast growing teams. I can remember one of my companies where we started with 10 salespeople, and in 1 year we were 120 salespeople. Now, if I had paid myself to run that team based upon the profitability or the revenues that were generated in that company, the base would be a rounding error compared to what I would have made on the upside of hiring that. So again, it's a mindset thing. You have to sell it in terms of the opportunity. And if the individual buys into your vision and buys into their ability to scale, then there should not be real hesitancy about betting on themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing you describing, Jack, is that salesperson, sales manager who you hire and they want to wake up every morning and chew raw meat off the bone. Something that is hard to teach.
Listen, I'm going to, we're doing this spontaneity here, and I love it. I'm going to throw you right into the mix. You have uprooted your life completely from another country and imported yourself into Florida, and you could have gone and stayed where you were. You could have been hired at a salary of some significance with some upside and all of those certainties, and yet you unplugged yourself from your comfortable place and said, I'm going to make a bet because the upside is tremendous, and you know what, I have enough confidence in myself to pull this thing off. And you've been on a run ever since making that decision.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's there's certainly some tools, Mike, that we could talk about and give you. We can talk about bringing a prospecting mindset to recruitment. You have to always be looking. You have to get really clear about the profile and the traits of the person you want. You've got to build your virtual bench. You've got to have a courting process. You've got to look outside your industry. These are all things that you would have heard me and Jack talk about, which are the steps that you can follow to find that A player, that sales manager or salesperson who will wake up in the morning and want to chew raw meat off the bone. Build that team in quantity and quality, or build the sales by growing the customers they have or finding new ones. But as Jack says, I think it starts with mindset. And the challenge back to you, Mike, is how much do you believe in your vision, and will you back yourself to make it happen? Great. Well, I think let's move on, Jack, because we could spend probably half a day on each of these questions, given how commonplace they are in the work that we do. So the next person I have is John. John's from Seattle. And John asked a very interesting question, which I think is going to resonate with a lot of people. And that is, what is the best way to develop sales staff to ensure consistent follow-up routines, especially with seasonal customers? So it sounds to my ear like John's asking us about touch systems, Jack, which I know is a particular specialty of yours.
Yeah, and so I the first pushback would be somehow he articulates seasonal customers as if that makes them unique or different, or we should handle them differently. Maybe that's because they are handling them differently. In other words, just because they're seasonal doesn't mean that for the 8 months that it's not in season, they don't get touched. That would be stupid. So for me, I don't want to rely on humans. I don't want to rely on memory. I don't want to rely on a salesperson who has their own style. I'm a system and process guy. And, you know, in today's world, one of the advantages that we have over 20 years ago is there's incredible contact management software at very affordable entry fees that we can systematize all of that. And when you're talking about that touch system, and that really is my answer, is we need to think about it more from the standpoint of the mediums in which we touch those customers and the content with which we touch them. And all too often what happens is so many companies and salespeople rely on one or two mediums. Maybe they make a phone call, or maybe they outreach with some kind of a LinkedIn type of an approach, and that's it. And then the content is usually all about their company. And for me, that's a fail. So if I want to stay regularly in touch with people, I'm going to talk about personal visits, email, voicemail, snail mail, a phone call, all of that as a mix. And in the software, we can time each one of those so that it makes sense. And then what am I going to do content-wise? You know, one of the things that I'm doing with one of my clients right now is this guy loves book recommendations. Well, I read over 100 books a year. So book recommendations for me are left and right, boom, 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 boom. And I even tell him, hey, this one you probably should read on paper in the traditional book format. This one you probably ought to go with the audio because of this. And my client is, every time I talk to him, it's like, man, I love when you give me these these recommendations. That has nothing to do with teaching him about sales, curing his problems. It's building a relationship and finding a way to stand out different from my competitors. But all of that stuff, Morné, is all built into the system, and it just goes automatically. So the sales organization, salesperson doesn't need to think about it. It's happening, and they should be touched at the same time with, we just sent this out, we just did this, we just did that. So we're not caught by surprise.
Absolutely. No, a touch system, as you know, Jack, I tell this story from time to time, is probably one of the very first things that I implemented after you and I met. And it was the catalyst for growing my business across 3 different continents and now more than 30 different industries. That system and process of touching people with more than just, oh, hey, it's Morné. When are you thinking of signing off this proposal? Oh, hey, it's Morné. Can we have a catch-up call this week? You know, where we're burning goodwill because salespeople are unimaginative about those touches. And you're dealing with human beings who don't want to hear from you if the purpose of your touch is only to benefit you and not them. So figuring out how to do it in interesting ways, fun ways. I now carry a money bag, which is something that you talk about and have been talking about for a long time. I have my cards in there. I have my stamps in there. So I have ways to touch people even when I'm on planes. Even if I'm close to a post box, I can put a handwritten note in there. And then using the CRM has been a game changer for me, where I think the one thing that I did, again, based on what things that I learned from you, is I got myself an assistant who works in the Philippines, and he will trawl the CRM to look for birthdays, looks for different things, sends me a report on a Monday morning and says, Morné, here's what's happening in your prospect base this week, your customer base, your client base, with your swim coaches. You need to touch them. Would you like me to help you set up the link in the message, the emails, the text messages? And then all I have to do is click send, 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 send. And everybody in all 4 of my databases feels like I am like an octopus that doesn't sleep when I'm touching all of these things. But I've recognized that, to quote Jack Daly, if I don't have an assistant, I am one. So use
Morné,
the technology and get an assistant.
Let me override you here. In February, I had a birthday, and on social media, I probably heard good tidings from 1,000 people. Let's just say,
Sure.
And I'm enriched by that. But snail mail, a real tangible card, I probably got close to 100 of those. But the one that stands out more than any other is the one from you, and it was I took the effort, Morné took the effort to identify half a dozen photos of you and I doing different things over the past couple of years. And then you just type something in on the card, and it was all done with a piece of software. I get that, but it's sitting. My birthday was in February. It's now April. It's sitting in my office at the top of the pile, and I look at it every morning. And it has nothing to do with business, and it has everything to do with business. Personal touches are uniquely being able to stand out from the pack. And if we can do that with content, and we can do that with things you know about the person, then you just left your competitor in the dust. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, John asked a follow-up question, which wasn't really part of the remit, but you know what? It was such a great question, which I think is going to have mass appeal that I'm going to allow it. So John also asks, he's considering creating specialized and or regional sales roles. So it sounds like John's got national coverage at least, and he's looking to cut and carve up the sales function a little bit differently. He says, what is the best way to implement such a change when the result is that accounts will be taken from the customer's current salesperson and entrusted to another? What impact should we consider for the salesperson and the customer? So it sounds like we're looking at some kind of a territory reshuffle, or maybe a reshuffle based on verticals or industries, but that's going to mean that salespeople that he's had historically, who's had wider reach, now are going to have a more defined territory and or specialism. What is the impact that they should be thinking about on the team and the customer?
This may be a controversial answer. It could even be controversial between you and I,
Okay.
but certainly between John and myself. Look, I'm speaking from experience here. I've done this on multiple occasions, and that is, I would consider team selling for a short period of time. I'm going to call a short period of time 3 months, where the previous or current salesperson and the new salesperson are on the calls jointly. And they do that for, let's just say, 3 month period of time. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give a trust. I'm trying to create trust in the lateral such that over that 3 month period of time, the customer gets more acquainted and more comfortable with the new salesperson. And as the previous one fades into the sunset, they don't even feel like it even happened. It doesn't need to be a long period of time, but it needs to be long enough to build some comfort and trust. That takes care of both issues, the salesperson issue and the customer issue. But here's the part that potentially can be painful. So let me just explain it. I don't believe that there are expenses in business, only investments. And because of that mentality during that 3 month transitionary period, I have no hesitancy in paying both sales guys. And that might hurt my margin in the short run, but help the growth of my company in the long run. And I'm willing to make that investment of, in effect, paying twice. And I have done this successfully on more than a single occasion. And the customers and my salespeople all were thumbs up, and my company ended up growing significantly.
Actually, Jack, I think we're pretty much aligned on that. So I'm just going to add a little bit of color commentary on things that we've done for clients of ours that have had a similar need because of expanding their business. So what often happens if you're a growing business is your sales team grows organically. Your salespeople go out and they acquire clients, and especially in the US, we acquire clients all over the US, because what happens is I have a client in Kentucky who refers me to a client in Michigan, and all of a sudden I have a salesperson who is servicing clients in disparate places all over the country. As I grow my team and I start realizing that now territory coverage is actually really important, there comes a point in the development of my business where now I have to quote unquote clean things up a little bit, and I've got to create either state by state sales teams or by region. And that then brings us to this particular challenge that John has. Now, when I've seen this go wrong, it's often because not only has the company not done what you've just explained, because they don't want to pay the double commissions, they don't want to invest the time, it feels like duplication of effort. But in addition to that, They've not thought about what that handover process looks like. Give you a couple of examples. For instance, the one thing that I don't see companies doing is, in addition to the joint field sales calls that or virtual calls that they need to be doing, transfer of trust often happens outside of business, like we've just been talking about. I don't see the company allowing those salespeople to spend social time together, go for a lunch, play a round of golf, whatever it might be that that customer enjoys doing, so that we can get away from this clinical virtual call or a 1 hour meeting in person, and you can get to know the human being. The other thing that I don't see companies doing enough is what you and I talk about when we talk about personality styles or communication preferences. We don't capture in the CRM all of the history that that original salesperson has with that prospect of that company, where they've identified the stakeholders and they've inserted their knowledge about whether this person is a driver, an expressive, and amiable, and how to deal with them. Imagine you being assigned a brand new customer. You give one of your customers to me, and you don't tell me that the CEO is a driver, the CFO is an analytical, and the HR manager is an amiable. And I storm my way into that company thinking, I'm great, I can do this, and I'm basically treating them all the same. Well, you and I both know that statistically, 2 out of the 3 are going to be pissed off because I haven't adapted my communication style to their personality. So yes, absolutely.
That's so rock solid. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the frustrating thing for me is I view so much of this as this isn't hard. It's not, we're not talking about difficult math equations. It's easy. It's just making the commitment to doing it.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Brett is next. Brett is from St. Louis again, and he says, without spending a ton of money on something like Salesforce, what tracking systems or tools are out there for smaller organizations? Any suggestions? I'm actually going to jump in here because I don't think we're going to get into a debate about technology. Brett, I'm more than happy for me and you to talk one-on-one on experiences that I've had with CRM systems and etc. But I'll start by reiterating a cliche, and that is the best CRM is the one you use. So what I'd rather want to talk about and maybe get some input from you, Jack, is my question to you, Brett, my pushback is going to be, how much conviction do you have that the things that you're tracking are the right things? How much conviction do you have that you're tracking leading indicators of success and not just revenue and gross profit and bottom line profit? Are we looking at leading indicators like small, medium, and large deals? Are we looking at the lag on the various types of deals? Are we looking at the behaviors and activities that you expect to hold your salespeople accountable to? Do I know day by day, week by week, month by month, how many calls I need to make, how many networking events, how many prospecting emails, how many quotes I need to send, what my conversion ratio needs to be at various stages of my sales process? Because if you know that, Brett, then an Excel spreadsheet will do. You can build a dashboard where the quality of what you're tracking is so high quality and so indicative and predictive of success that the technology is less important. And in fact, if you don't have a CRM today, and this goes for everybody listening today to the session, if you don't have a CRM today, I would encourage you to build your dashboards into an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc first. Make the mistakes in something that is ubiquitous and easy to use. And once you've figured out what your KPIs are, then we can find a piece of technology that you can add the automation and some of the AI and intelligence to prompt your salespeople. Then it becomes more than a contact manager. It becomes a sales enablement technology.
And all I can do with that is say, bravo, 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 bravo. An actual professional sales training organization saying maybe the best idea is a handwritten worksheet to get things started or a simple Excel spreadsheet. Bravo, bravo, bravo. So look, you obviously hit it. There's a lot of factors to be considered here. An awful lot of people throw the Salesforce name up there as, hey, is this where I should go? My answer to many, many clients is, no, that's not your answer. And quite frankly, what I would tell Brent is, it's to figure this out. It's as easy as going online and just saying alternatives to Salesforce software, and you'll come up with studies and reports. And by the way, these studies and reports will be customized to you based on you answering questions on their website about what your organization is, what it looks like, and so forth, and they'll tailor their findings in the report. But look, some of my clients that have wrestled this thing down, let me give Brent some names of some things that he may want to look at. A lot of people are very keen on Pipedrive. Obviously, many people are using HubSpot. Zendesk is another alternative, and Fresh Sales. So there's 4 straight out of the way that are rated on a scale of 1 to 5, 4.5 to 5 of alternatives. And this is feedback from my clients, watching them work, and little research on the web. The alternatives are out there, but
Absolutely.
I love where you went with it. Figure it out before you go with any of them.
And just in case this ends up on YouTube and everywhere else, the legal disclaimer before my lawyer calls me is we are CRM agnostic. We're not telling people to buy or not buy Salesforce or any other piece of software. Right, the next one.
World.
Such a litigious world. The next one is from Keith, and Keith is actually up the road here in the Tampa Bay area. And Keith has it's a fairly long question, but actually it comes down to a pretty simple concept. I'm going to read the whole question because I'd like our listeners to get the context of what Keith is asking. And then I know I have a strong feeling as to where you're going to focus in on this one. So Keith says, how do I take a culture, and I'm presuming he's talking about sales culture. How do I take a culture that's focused on customer and client service and support and move the needle towards business development and a more sales-driven ethic? We don't want to lose what makes us successful with respect to superior customer support, but we need to move the needle on prioritizing and developing business development relationships and sales. The challenge is that for us, sales, or specifically new sales, is about building the next long-term relationship and not just closing a single sale. Targeting and follow through are critical components to a successful sale. So what I'm hearing Keith say is, first and foremost, to my ear, there is to my mind, a limiting belief in this business that offering superior service and building long-term relationships are somehow conflicting with new business practices. That's what I'm hearing. What are you hearing, Jack?
Look, investment versus expense. This is again one of those things that intrinsically leads us to making poor decisions. My answer may sound like it's an expense, and yet it's not at all. I think that the team that he has and what they're focused on, they've already demonstrated that they're playing to their strengths and they're really good at what they're doing. What they're not good at doing is business development. That's because the profile of those individuals is not the profile for a business development team. So don't confuse the two. Build a business development team with the right profile of people. If you ask me to do 2 things and I happen to have a skill set that plays to one of them and not to the other, where am I going to spend my time? If I have 100% of my time, I'm going to spend 80 to 90% or more of my time on the one that I'm good at and that I enjoy, and then give you some lip service about the other. So that's what's happening right now. They're not getting the business development because they're getting lip service, because that's not what I'm good at. It doesn't give me intrinsic joy. And yet, if you gave me the role that those folks are playing in his company today, if you gave that to me, I would fail at that, because all I want to do is go do business development. That's who I am, right? So let's divide the roles, and don't get wigged out on I can't afford to hire more people type of thing. That's what the holdback here really is. underlying the question in my eyes. That's where I come from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a really interesting saying that I often remind clients, and that's don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Like sometimes, we have to put people into seats, as you say, where they're in their sweet spot. Now, he talks about the cultural piece. So on the cultural piece, as I said, Keith, for me, I would start by examining the mindset that you have in the business, the cultural mindset, which is we can't give great service and build long-term relationships and also do new business. So it sounds to me like there might be a limiting belief that new business is transactional and what you do is consultative. And I think I'd like to examine that, as Jack said at the beginning of this session. There's lots more questions that I have, but I would certainly start by asking questions around what are the beliefs around consultative selling in this business? How do we actually view bringing in new clients? Keeping in mind that one of the best ways to attract new business is to provide great service and develop raving fan customers. Because if we have that,
Morné, for me to be a business development guy and have a companion superstar on the customer service side is nirvana. And I don't downplay their role. The first sale is the beginning of the process. It's the continuing sales that's really the heart of profitability in a firm, and that is the team he has today. We just want new business development to be a priority as well.
Absolutely. So I think in a nutshell, Keith, this is a very big topic. It's a great topic, and I suspect one that many businesses are wrestling with. I think there's elements around making sure that we have the right people in the right seats, as both Jack and I are saying. I think that there's an element around investigating or being inquisitive about what is the beliefs that you have culturally in the business about new business versus ongoing relationships. Why is it that may or may not be in conflict? And then I think that there's a practical piece of work that can be done around if you have the right business development animals in the right seats, how can we leverage your great reputation, your great brand, your great customer service? How can we leverage the long-term relationships that you have and teach your people how to ask for referrals? Ask them to become clients and not just customers. Increase share of wallet and build a repeatable selling system within your company. Right. 2 more to go, Jack. I think we're already over our normal 35 minutes, as is the habit with you and I. We're both so passionate about this. I think what we'll do is we'll probably cut this session up into a few clips and then share it with people piecemeal so that they have the ability to absorb what we're saying. So the last one, or second to last one, is actually from Cindy. Cindy is based here in Florida. And Cindy asks, what are the most effective ways to manage a sales team? For example, how often should the sales manager meet with each individual salesperson versus the entire team together? And what should the focus and content of these respective meetings be?
Yeah, I'm going to give this one a short answer, not because of the time overrun, because I think it's that simple.
Okay.
Look, whoever a salesperson reports to in the organization, and there could be many layers because I had one that was 2,600 salespeople. So, but if you go more than a span of 12 to 15 salespeople that you're managing, I think you're too spread too thin. So there's layers in an organization depending upon the size. Whoever the salesperson is reporting to, I would be uncomfortable if they weren't meeting once a week. In addition to that, I would be uncomfortable if they were meeting for more than an hour, because my salespeople want to be in the field face to face, bringing new business in. If I have the right salespeople, that's really where we make our money. And if I'm a sales manager, that's where I want my team as well. So I like weekly one-on-one meetings, no more than an hour. They're agenda driven. Before we even have the meeting, we both understand what the content is going to be. And quite frankly, if I were to narrow it down to I only want to talk about one thing, I'll talk about every week. Let's review your pipeline. Because if I can focus on the pipeline, that is always going to translate into increased sales. And if it doesn't, it's going to indicate gaps in the way we are selling that I can now fix, such that everyone in the organization from a selling standpoint benefits from. So weekly, 1 hour max, and drive the pipeline.
Okay. Cindy, I'll give a little bit of extra commentary on that. For me, the cadence for sales management has got 4 parts to it. I think you need a quarterly planning session with your entire team once a quarter, offsite preferably, half a day. And we're going to look at priority setting, KPIs, goals, a little look back on the last 100 days, and what are we focusing on at the expense of everything else in the next 100 days. I'm encouraging my clients that have got distributed sales teams where they have remote sales teams all over the country to even make that a full day and take it off site, because there's real power in proximity. We need these salespeople to be rubbing up against each other physically, because therein lies a lot of the things that have gotten lost post-COVID when we now have these completely remote teams. The second thing that I would do as a monthly deep dive. Monthly, I want to really get into, are the things that we're tracking working? What is the efficacy of what we're doing and what we're not doing? In the monthly deep dive, I also want to be doing iterations of my playbook. You should have a good playbook, which is a collection of all your best practices, as we know. And there's time in the monthly deep dive, which is normally about a 2-hour session, for us to take one of the topics and do a bit of iteration and learning on that on a monthly basis. And then in the weeks in between, I want to see a combination of accountability sessions, which is what Jack just mentioned, that pipeline investigation. And then finally, an element of performance coaching, which is both group and individual. And in that performance coaching, I'd like to see joint field or virtual sales calls. I want to see some role practice. I want to see some call reviews. I want to see you working on the personal development plan with the salesperson. And finally, I want to see some live opportunity pipeline coaching. That's where a salesperson comes to you and says, here are the 2 deals that I want to sign this month. I'm struggling. Help me to increase the probability of signing these deals. Those are some of the elements that I would want to see a sales manager lean into. But as Jack said, if you get into a scenario where you have more than 8 or 10 or 12 salespeople, then you probably need to start thinking about multiple sales managers for your sales team in order to keep that kind of cadence and rhythm of touches going.
And Morné, one reminder here, and that is what percentage of the time is the sales manager spending sitting at their desk or behind a computer? My style, 75% of the time for a sales manager is not in their office and not behind a computer. It's belly to belly in the field. That's where you really make the difference. And so I would just ask, Cindy and anyone else, just take a note. How often is the sales manager sitting at quote unquote corporate in an office and in meetings? Where the rubber meets the road is where the customer and prospects are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Final one. The final one is from Jamie. Jamie is also from Seattle. Jamie says, my salespeople are also estimators and project managers. They find the work to bid, work up the estimate, negotiate the sale, and work with the client through the job. They're all good at numbers and bidding. Some of them are good at sales, but many are not your traditional extroverts and have a tough time drumming up new work. What should I do to teach more introverted and analytical minds to be better at sales? How do you encourage them to leave their office and meet new people?
So the question has biases all the way running through it. And the bias is, if you're an introvert, you're screwed when it comes to business development and selling. and people that are tuning in on this that have seen me on the stage may be up for a revelation here, but I am, there's hardly anyone that is more introverted than I am. And yet I've had a historically giant success rate as a salesperson. So please don't put your bias and negativity on introverts not being able to sell effectively. Look, the answer to this from my perspective, one is people can't get good at something unless they've trained and practiced. So all the things that they're doing and they're good at right now, if you're asking them for doing business development, have you identified best practices? Have you trained them with best practices? And are they actually practicing, not on the prospect, but before they hit the prospect? So there's an investment there in terms of getting the people ready to do that. The second thing that I wanted to inquire here was what percentage of the time of these people that are doing the estimating, negotiating, working with the client, what percent, that's their time right now. What percent of the time are you seeking for them to allocate to business development? You have to be really clear with me if I'm in that role. Do you expect me to be doing 20% of my time, 50% of my time? Because that changes the dynamic of the quality level that I'm going to deliver on what I'm now delivering, since what I'm now delivering is 100% of my time. And then the third component for me is, and look, there are different schools of thought on this. I happen to be very bullish about getting compensation right for the salespeople, and there are different thoughts of it that are circling around out there. There are books written about it, that people don't work for money and all of that type of thing. I disagree. And when I go out and I have a conversation with the top 25% of salespeople, no matter what country I'm in, if I told them, well, there's current thinking going on that it's provocative, that that compensation is not what you get up in the morning for if you're a sales guy. It's way beyond that, and all they want to do is just laugh me out of town. So what are you doing with these people that are doing estimating and negotiating and all the rest of that in their current role? What are you doing compensation wise for me from a business development standpoint? So those components, training, percent of time, and compensation, I think are the three variables that I think you need to deal with.
I love that, Jack. I'm gonna add to that, Jamie, and say, for me, it really does start with, how much do you want to lean into the idea that your current set of estimators and project managers actually need to generate new business. If the decision is they absolutely have to, well, then first and foremost, there's probably an element around sales culture that will need to change. Because if the sales culture is, we don't really do new business here, then it doesn't matter what we tell people to do. They're not going to behave contrary to what the sales culture is. Who is leading the charge in your organization? Who is setting the example? Are you setting the example? Is one of your senior people setting the example, showing your estimators and project managers how to go out and be magnetic for sales? I hope you can't hear that, but I'm having this construction happening next to us. I'm hoping this microphone is doing its job and canceling that out. So there's a cultural issue that needs to be addressed, which I would encourage you to look at. Secondly, as we've said earlier in this talk, sometimes you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Sometimes an estimator or project manager with the best will in the world is just not going to be a hunter. And you might need to consider hiring a business development team, an outside sales team that goes and finds the opportunities, brings them back. And then what we want to do is make your estimators and project managers exceptional at being account managers and farmers, about increasing the share of wallet with every single opportunity so that we have that discretionary income and profit to be able to fund the front end that we're adding to the process, and to coach them on how to ask for referrals so that we have new business being generated out of our existing bids. If either one of those two options is not 100% what you're after, then I'll give you an example of something that I've done with a number of my clients. I spent about a decade of my life in the commercial construction industry. We still have many, many clients in construction, engineering, and manufacturing where they have exactly this challenge, where they don't have a quote unquote traditional sales team. One of the things that we've helped a couple of our clients do is we leverage the senior people in the team, yourself as the founder, any senior people that are willing to go out and find new relationships, find new, what we would call swim coaches, you might call centers of influence or referral partners, warm up those relationships and then hand them over to your estimators and project managers. So effectively, we're leveraging your internal resources to make sure that there's new relationships coming in. But here's the difference. When I say centers of influence, you can either go out into the market and try and find customers one at a time. That's going to be difficult, and you're going to have a glass ceiling when it comes to scaling your business. Or you can do what so many of our customers have done, and I know Jack has done in the real estate business, is find what we call swim coaches. Find those people that can refer a lifetime worth of business to you even if they themselves never buy from you. And those are the relationships that you can hand over to your estimators or project managers. They can farm those relationships, they can develop those relationships, and one company or organization like that might give one of your estimators millions of dollars with the business over a period of time without them ever having to make a cold call. Any final thoughts, Jack?
Yeah, when I think about the half a dozen questions that we just went through, for me, there was a theme. And I said it a couple times, knowing the difference between making an investment in your business and what is an expense. Because so many questions hidden in there is, I'm trying to be very protective of my money. And I'm not asking you to just throw your money away, but there is a very big difference between making a sound business investment because you believe in the vision and not being penny wise and dollar foolish, right? Mm-hmm. So that holds an awful lot of my coach clients back until I call them out on it and push them to take a chance with a business developer that you've never had before. And let's make that person a success and watch the return on investment on that one individual. And now can you imagine if it were 5 or 10 and we start to go and all of a sudden it's let's go, right? So investment versus expense. We've seemed to have themes that go on here, whether it's the mindset theme or the staying in touch with people theme and all of what you mentioned earlier. This one for me, investment versus expense.
No, I'd have to agree. And I think these questions came from scaling up companies. They're going through that growth curve. I think oftentimes the CEO, business owner, entrepreneur wants to make that investment, but there's an element of reluctance or fear about, will that investment pay off? Will I get the ROI that I'm after? And to that, I would say I have empathy for you. Both Jack and I have built multiple companies. There is no business without risk, but I will leave you with this thought. Nothing changes if nothing changes, to quote Winston Churchill. So if you're stuck in a particular sales challenge today, nothing's going to change until something changes. And maybe that change after today will be, you're going to take that leap, or you're going to seek out a good partner to show you what is possible. Seek out companies, partners, consultants who have walked the walk and not just talked the talk, to show you how other companies like you have gone on this journey and actually make it happen. There's plenty of resources out there. Feel free to reach out to either Jack or myself if you so please. But Jack, I wanted to say thank you so much for your time today. This has been one of my favorite sessions that we've done over the last few months. Real questions from real people, and I'm sure it's going to make a big difference, not only to the half a dozen CEOs that got their questions featured today, but many other scaling up businesses that are going through the same thing.
Hey, Morné, I think this thing was so high value that anyone that's watching / listening to it that has questions ought to send them to you. And we should do multiple sessions like this. And so we would just encourage anybody that's watching and listening, where do they send their questions?
So if you want to get in touch with me, as I'm on the road a lot, send it to takeaction@immersesales.com. I will put the notes of where you can find me into the show notes, so you can reach out, or you can go to Immerse Sales. That's Immerse with an E, immersesales.com. All the contact information is on there. And yes, Jack, I absolutely agree with you. I think I will encourage more CEOs to send us questions, because these themes, I'm sure, are at the moment things that people are wrestling with in hundreds of thousands of businesses all over the world. And I'm very glad that we can give them, our view and what we would do if they were asking us for help. Thank you so much, Jack. I hope you enjoy the Masters. I'm sure you have a favorite. I'm not going to ask you who it is. I'm going to put my iPad on immediately and see what's happening with the boys, and have a fantastic weekend.
My favorite appears to be out of the running already.
Oh dear.
I was looking for the completion of a lifetime of the 4 majors, but another year.
Fair enough. Thanks very much.
See you, my friend.